September 15th, 1940. Dawn breaks over the English Channel with pale, colourless light. A formation of Heinkel He 111 bombers drones toward London at 12,000 feet, their twin engines beating a confident rhythm through cold morning air. Inside the lead aircraft, Oberleutnant Franz Steiger adjusts his oxygen mask and scans the horizon. Below, the patchwork fields of Kent stretch into mist. Above, only empty sky. The Luftwaffe owns this sky. They have owned it for months, then something appears in Steiger's peripheral vision. Dark, fast, wrong, not a Spitfire, not a Hurricane. The silhouette is bulkier, heavier, with a nose that looks almost blunt. Twin engines. The shape closes distance with alarming speed, positioning itself beneath the formation where gunners struggle to track. Steiger's hand moves toward the intercom switch, but before he can speak, tracer rounds slice upward through the bomber's belly. Metal shrieks, hydraulic fluid sprays across the cockpit glass. The strange fighter pulls away, rolling with unexpected agility for something so ungainly. In those seconds, something fundamental shifts. The aircraft that just gutted Steiger's bomber shouldn't exist, shouldn't be this fast, this heavily armed, this lethal. But it does exist. And the Luftwaffe is about to learn what happens when certainty meets innovation born from desperation. Summer 1940, Europe lies under German occupation, and the Luftwaffe stands as the most feared air force on the planet. In 6 weeks, Hitler's aircraft have torn through Polish defences, swept over Norway, and demolished French resistance. The Blitzkrieg doctrine, rapid, coordinated strikes combining air power with ground forces, has rewritten the rules of modern warfare. Reichsmarschall Hermann Göring's pilots return from missions with stories of easy victories, of enemies scattered before the Messerschmitt Bf 109 and Bf 110 fighters could even engage properly. The numbers tell the story: over 4,000 operational aircraft, battle, hardened crews, and momentum that seems unstoppable. Across the Channel, Britain stands alone. France has fallen. The British Expeditionary Force has evacuated from Dunkirk, leaving behind tanks, artillery, and, critically, hundreds of aircraft destroyed on French airfields or lost in desperate covering actions. RAF Fighter Command, under Air Chief Marshal Hugh Dowding, counts fewer than 700 serviceable fighters. The math is brutal. Intelligence reports indicate Germany is massing bombers along the French and Belgian coasts. Reconnaissance photographs show airfield after airfield packed with aircraft bearing black crosses. Invasion barges gather in occupied ports. Operation Sea Lion, the planned amphibious assault on Britain, waits only for one condition: German air superiority over the Channel and southern England. The Luftwaffe believes this will take weeks at most. Their confidence is not arrogance. It is calculation based on demonstrated performance. The Messerschmitt Bf 109E remains the finest single-engine fighter in the world, capable of outclimbing the Hurricane and matching the Spitfire in most performance envelopes. German bomber crews, flying Heinkel He 111s, Dornier Do 17s, and Junkers Ju 88s, have been training for years in Spain, Poland, and France. They know their tactics. They trust their escorts. They have seen British fighters destroyed in droves over France. But the Battle of Britain, beginning officially in July 1940, reveals cracks in German assumptions. Dowding's system integrating radar stations along the coast, observer corps inland, and fighter control rooms that vector squadrons precisely toward incoming raids, proves far more resilient than expected. Spitfires and Hurricanes intercept raids with uncanny accuracy, hitting Luftwaffe formations before they reach strategic targets. German losses mount. By August, Göring shifts strategy, ordering attacks directly on RAF airfields, attempting to destroy fighter command on the ground and in the air simultaneously. The attacks are devastating. Airfields burn. Hangars collapse. Pilots scramble multiple times per day, exhaustion etched into every face. Squadron strength dwindles not from lack of aircraft. British factories are producing Spitfires and Hurricanes faster than Germany realizes, but from pilot losses. Trained fighter pilots cannot be replaced quickly. Every man shot down represents months of training lost. By early September, fighter command teeters on the edge. Some squadrons operate at half strength. Others cannibalize damaged aircraft for parts just to keep a few airworthy. Yet Germany faces its own crisis, one less visible but equally critical. Daylight bombing raids over England are proving far costlier than campaigns over Poland or France. British radar denies surprise. British fighters, though outnumbered in individual engagements, fight over home territory where downed pilots can return to duty while German crews become prisoners. The Messerschmitt Bf 110, Germany's twin, engine-heavy fighter meant to escort bombers deep into enemy territory, proves disastrously vulnerable to Spitfires and Hurricanes. Losses among bomber crews begin affecting morale. Raids that should take hours stretch into full-day operations as formations reassemble after fighter attacks. Then, on September 7th, Hitler makes a decision that changes everything. Enraged by RAF raids on Berlin retaliatory strikes for Luftwaffe bombs accidentally dropped on London, he orders Göring to abandon attacks on airfields and focus entirely on terror-bombing British cities. The Blitz begins. Hundreds of bombers hammer London night after night, attempting to break civilian morale and force Churchill's government to negotiate. Fighter Command, given breathing space to rebuild, survives its most dangerous moment. But the Blitz reveals another British weakness, night defence. RAF fighters, designed for daylight interception, struggle hopelessly in darkness. Spitfires and Hurricanes rely on visual contact, and finding a bomber in black sky proves nearly impossible even with ground control guidance. Searchlight batteries and anti-aircraft guns throw up walls of fire, but hit rates remain pathetically low, often less than one bomber downed per 1,000 shells fired. German crews quickly learn that night missions, while nerve-wracking, are far safer than daylight raids. They fly with near impunity, dropping high explosives and incendiaries on cities that cannot effectively fight back. London burns, Coventry burns, Liverpool, Birmingham, Southampton, all suffer under the relentless nightly assault. British civilian casualties climb into tens of thousands. The government issues gas masks, organizes evacuation of children, and converts underground stations into shelters where families sleep on platforms while trains rumble past. Above ground, fire brigades battle infernos that can be seen from 50 miles away. The Luftwaffe is not winning the war in the conventional sense, but it is inflicting terrible damage, and Britain has no answer. This is the crisis that demands innovation. Fighter Command needs an aircraft capable of finding and destroying bombers in total darkness, something faster than existing night fighters, something with endurance to patrol for hours, something with firepower to kill bombers quickly before they can drop their loads. The solution, when it arrives, will not look like a traditional fighter. It will look, to German eyes, almost absurd, but it will change everything. The aircraft that will challenge Luftwaffe night dominance does not emerge from a clean, chic design or sudden breakthrough. It evolves from desperation, adaptation, and the unlikely transformation of a bomber into something lethal. The Bristol Aeroplane Company, based in Filton near Bristol, has been producing aircraft since 1910. By 1940, their most notable recent product is the Bristol Blenheim, a twin-engine light bomber that entered service in 1937. The Blenheim, originally designed as a fast civilian transport, became a military aircraft almost by accident when the Air Ministry recognized its speed potential. With a top speed of around 260 mph, it could outrun many contemporary fighters, making it attractive as a bomber that might not need heavy defensive armament. But war transforms requirements faster than design bureaus can respond. By 1940, the Blenheim as a bomber is already obsolescent, too slow to escape modern fighters, too lightly armed to defend itself, and too vulnerable to flak. Blenheim's squadrons suffer appalling casualties in daylight operations over Europe. The aircraft that seemed revolutionary in 1937 has become a death trap by 1940, yet the basic airframe possesses qualities that catch the attention of fighter command planners: twin engines for endurance, enough internal space for equipment, and a sturdy structure capable of carrying heavy loads. In late 1938, before war begins, the Air Ministry requests Bristol to develop a fighter variant of the Blenheim. The result is the Blenheim IF, essentially a standard bomber with the glazed bombardier nose replaced by a solid nose packed with four 303 Browning machine guns. It is crude, improvised, and underpowered. Maximum speed barely exceeds 280 mph. Maneuverability is poor. Against modern German fighters, the Blenheim IF would be slaughtered in seconds. But Fighter Command does not intend it for dogfighting. They intend it for night interception, where speed matters less than endurance and the ability to carry early radar equipment. The first AIR interception. Radar sets become available in 1940. These primitive systems, weighing hundreds of pounds and requiring a dedicated radar operator, can detect aircraft at ranges up to 3 miles under ideal conditions. The technology is revolutionary but temperamental. Operators peer at flickering cathode ray tubes, interpreting blips that might be bombers or might be false returns from clouds, hills, or even flocks of birds. Ground controllers vector the night fighter into the general area of a bomber track. Then the onboard radar takes over, guiding the fighter close enough for visual identification. In theory, this system can work. In practice, it requires an aircraft large enough to carry the equipment, with endurance to patrol for hours, and with firepower to destroy a bomber quickly once contact is made. The Blenheim IF, equipped with AIMK, Roman 3 radar, becomes RAF's first operational night fighter in early 1940. Results are mixed. The aircraft is slow, the radar unreliable, and crews are learning entirely new tactics with no precedent. During the early months of the Blitz, Blenheim night fighters achieve occasional successes, but more often they wander fruitlessly through darkness, unable to locate targets even when ground controllers place them within miles of bomber streams. Frustrated pilots report seeing the glow of fires from bombed cities below, while bombers drone past invisibly in the black above. Bristol, meanwhile, has been developing something far more potent. The Bristol Type 156, later named the Beaufighter, begins as a private venture in 1938, using wings and tail surfaces from the unsuccessful Beaufort torpedo bomber mated to a new, powerful fuselage. The design philosophy is simple: maximum firepower, maximum speed, built quickly using existing components to avoid production delays. 400 horsepower Bristol Hercules radial engines give the Beaufighter a top speed of 320 mph, faster than many single-engine fighters. The nose armament is ferocious. 420 mm Hispano cannons clustered tightly in the lower fuselage, plus 6 303 machine guns in the wings. This represents more firepower than an entire squadron of Hurricanes combined. The Beaufighter's appearance is brutal, ungainly, almost ugly. The fuselage is thick and slab-sided. The nose is blunt, housing the cannon battery and radar antenna. The wings are thick, designed for strength rather than elegance. Landing gear is sturdy, but creates significant drag. Next to the graceful lines of a Spitfire or the predatory sleekness of a Bf-109, the Beaufighter looks like a truck, heavy, slow, incapable of the aerobatics that define fighter combat. German intelligence, monitoring RAF aircraft types through reconnaissance and interrogation of captured pilots, initially dismisses reports of the Beaufighter. Luftwaffe analysts categorize it as another mediocre British twin-engine fighter, probably similar to the failed Blenheim or the underarmed Defiant turret fighter. They assume any twin-engine aircraft will be too slow and unmaneuverable to threaten experienced bomber crews flying in darkness. This assumption is catastrophic. The first Beaufighters reach operational squadrons in September 1940, just as the Blitz intensifies. Crews transitioning from Blenheims or single-engine fighters find the new aircraft challenging. It is heavy on the controls, requires careful management of engine power, and demands precise coordination between pilot and radar operator. The AIMK, Roman 4 radar, while improved over earlier versions, still requires exceptional skill to interpret. Training is rushed. There is no time for extensive workup when cities are burning nightly. Yet even in these early weeks, certain pilots begin to master the Beaufighter's peculiar characteristics. They learn that while it cannot dogfight, it can dive rapidly without structural failure. They discover that the 420mm cannons, when fired in a concentrated burst, can disintegrate a bomber in seconds. They realize that the aircraft's very ugliness, its blunt, powerful appearance, conceals a predator's capabilities. The Beaufighter is not graceful, it is not agile, but it is fast enough, tough enough, and deadly enough to kill bombers in conditions where sleek, beautiful fighters are utterly helpless. By October 1940, Beaufighter squadrons are flying regular night patrols over southern England and the Midlands. Ground controllers vector them toward bomber streams detected by coastal radar chains. Onboard radar operators crouch in darkened cockpits, watching their scopes for the telltale blips of hostile aircraft. Pilots fly in absolute blackness, trusting instruments, trusting their operators, trusting that when visual contact is finally made, their cannons will fire true. The Luftwaffe does not yet understand what is hunting them. They are about to learn, in fire and terror, that the skies they claimed as their own are no longer uncontested. Angle 1. The pilot's prospective flight lieutenant John Cunningham climbs into the Beaufighter's cockpit on a cold October night in 1940, and the first thing he notices is how solid everything feels. The metal is thick. The controls are heavy. This is not a machine built for elegance or aerobatic display. It is built to absorb punishment and deliver devastation. Behind him, in the cramped navigator's position, Sergeant Jimmy Rawnsley settles into his seat, already checking the AIMK. Roman 4 radar equipment that fills the space where a bombardier would sit in the aircraft's Beaufort ancestor. Learning to fly the Beaufighter means unlearning assumptions. Single-engine fighter pilots transitioning to the type initially try to throw it around the sky like a Spitfire and nearly tear the wings off in the process. The Beaufighter does not want to turn tightly. It does not want to loop or roll quickly. What it does want, what it is designed for, is straight. Line speed, rapid climbs, and diving attacks where its weight becomes an advantage rather than a liability. Cunningham learns to work with the aircraft rather than fight it. He learns that smooth, deliberate control inputs yield better results than aggressive yanking on the stick. He learns to manage engine temperatures carefully during long patrols, to balance fuel consumption between the two Hercules radials, to feel through the controls when the aircraft approaches stall speed in darkness where visual references vanish. The night fighting technique is entirely new. Ground controllers at sector stations guide the Beaufighter towards suspected bomber tracks, using plots from chain-home radar stations along the coast. The controller's voice crackles through static. Bandit bearing 2, 7s, Aero, Angels 12, range 15 miles. Cunningham turns to the heading, climbs or descends to the specified altitude, and begins the patient stalk. At around 3 miles, Rawnsley picks up the contact on his radar scope. A faint blip among the electronic noise. Contact dead ahead, range 2 miles. He reports, his voice calm despite adrenaline. Cunningham reduces speed slightly to avoid overshooting. The blip moves on the scope. Rawnsley calls corrections. Left, steady. Range 1 mile. At half a mile, sometimes less, Cunningham begins searching visually. On clear nights with moonlight, he might glimpse the bomber's silhouette against clouds or stars. On overcast nights, he looks for exhaust flames, the faint blue glow from engine manifolds that betrays position. Sometimes he sees nothing until he is 200 yards behind the target. close enough to make out the twin-engine shape, the greenhouse canopy, the black crosses on wings. He positions the Beaufighter slightly below and behind, where the bomber's ventral gunner has limited field of fire. His thumb rests on the cannon firing button. One burst, that is all most targets require. 4 20mm shells per second, high, explosive and incendiary, converging on a point just forward of where the pilot sits. The Heinkel or Dornier erupts in flame, pieces flying backward past Cunningham's canopy. He breaks away, diving to avoid debris, while Rawnsley confirms the kill, watching the burning wreck spiral toward Earth. This is not the glamorous dogfighting of propaganda films. It is methodical, patient, and brutal. Cunningham flies patrol after patrol, sometimes making contact, often wandering for hours without finding anything despite ground controllers' assurances that bombers are nearby. The exhaustion is cumulative, night flying destroys normal sleep patterns, and the constant tension of operating in darkness wears on nerves. Yet when contact is made, when the cannons fire and another Luftwaffe bomber ceases to exist, the sense of achievement is profound. These are not abstract victories. Below, in cities lit by fires, people shelter in basements and tube stations. Every bomber destroyed is lives saved, homes preserved, morale protected. Angle 2, the engineering paradox. The Beaufighter's effectiveness springs from design choices that seem contradictory. It is heavy, over 15,000 pounds empty, nearly 21,000 pounds fully loaded, yet it achieves 320 mph faster than many single-engine fighters. This paradox resolves when examining the Bristol Hercules engines. Each produces 400 horsepower, giving the Beaufighter a power-to-weight ratio that compensates for its bulk. The engines are reliable, proven in service, and crucially, already in production. Bristol's decision to use existing components, Beaufort wings, proven engines, established manufacturing techniques, means the Beaufighter can enter production quickly without tooling delays that plague clean sheet designs. The armament concentration is revolutionary. Previous fighter designs spread guns across the wings, creating convergence problems. The bullets from each gun cross at a preset distance, meaning accurate fire requires positioning at exactly the right range. The Beaufighter's 4 20mm Hispano cannons cluster in the lower fuselage, all firing parallel. This arrangement means shells fly in a tight group regardless of range, and the pilot simply aims the entire aircraft like a shotgun. The cannons themselves fire Hispano-Suiza ammunition. Each 20mm shell weighs over 4 ounces and contains high explosive with an impact fuse. A single hit can destroy an engine. 3 or 4 hits can break a bomber's back. British pilots quickly learn that a 1-second burst, 4 shells per gun, 16 total, is usually sufficient to achieve catastrophic damage. The airframe's sturdiness, initially criticized as excessive weight, proves essential for night operations. The Beaufighter can fly through severe weather that would ground lighter aircraft. It can absorb battle-damage flak hits, return fire from bomber gunners, and continue flying. Pilots report returning with holes in wings, damaged control surfaces, even one engine out, and still landing safely. This robustness gives crews confidence to press attacks that would be suicidal in frailer machines. Yet the design is not without flaws. The Beaufighter's control harmony is poor. Elevator forces are heavy while ailerons are relatively light, making coordinated turns awkward. The aircraft suffers from longitudinal instability in certain configurations, particularly when cannon ammunition is expended from the nose, shifting the center of gravity. Some early aircraft experienced tailplane flutter at high speeds, requiring structural modifications. Pilots learn these quirks through experience, sometimes fatally, but the fundamental soundness of the design's powerful engines, devastating armament, sturdy construction, outweighs the handling difficulties. Angle 3. The tactical surprise. Luftwaffe intelligence failures regarding the Beaufighter stem from doctrinal assumptions. German night bombing strategy relies on darkness as the primary defense. Bomber crews receive minimal training in night combat maneuvering because the expectation is that British fighters simply cannot find them. Early missions during the Blitz confirm this. Hundreds of bombers penetrate British airspace nightly with minimal losses to fighters. Anti-aircraft fire accounts for most casualties, and even those rates are low enough to be acceptable. When the first Beaufighters begin scoring kills in October 1940, Luftwaffe crews attribute losses to lucky encounters or particularly effective flak. The idea that British fighters possess onboard radar capable of detecting bombers in total darkness seems implausible. German night fighter development at this stage lags behind British efforts. The Luftwaffe has some Bf-110s equipped with early radar sets, but these are primarily deployed defending German airspace against RAF bomber raids, not for offensive operations. The concept that Britain, supposedly on the verge of collapse, has developed and fielded an effective radar-equipped night fighter surprises German commanders. Interrogation reports from the few surviving Beaufighter crews shot down over occupied Europe provide fragmentary intelligence, but Luftwaffe analysts struggle to believe the claimed performance figures. An aircraft that heavy, carrying that much equipment, achieving those speeds. The numbers seem exaggerated, possibly disinformation meant to boost British morale. German reconnaissance flights over Britain attempt to photograph the new fighter type, but Beaufighters operate primarily at night from dispersed airfields, making identification difficult. Angle 4, the night fighter revolution, the marriage of radar and aircraft transforms air warfare in ways no pre-war theorist anticipated. Before AI radar, night interception depends entirely on visual contact, a nearly impossible task when both hunter and hunted fly in three-dimensional darkness. Ground controllers can vector fighters toward general areas where bombers are detected, but the final miles require luck, moonlight, or the glow of city fires silhouetting targets. Success rates hover near zero. Most night patrols end with frustrated pilots landing after hours of fruitless searching, fuel exhausted, nerves frayed, having never glimpsed an enemy aircraft despite knowing dozens crossed nearby. AIMK Roman 4 radar, fitted to Beaufighters from autumn 1940 onward, changes this calculus fundamentally. The system consists of transmitter and receiver units, antennas mounted in the nose, and a display scope in the radar operator's position. When functioning properly, it detects aircraft-sized targets at ranges up to 4 miles, displaying them as luminous blips on the cathode ray tube. The operator, critical to the system's success, must interpret these blips, distinguishing actual aircraft from ground returns, clouds, or electronic interference. This requires exceptional concentration and a peculiar mental skill, almost an intuition, for reading patterns in electronic noise. The best radar operators become legends in their squadrons. Sergeant Jimmy Rawnsley, flying with John Cunningham, develops an almost supernatural ability to track contacts through interference. Flight Sergeant Phillips, working with Flight Lieutenant Braham, can maintain contact with targets, maneuvering violently to evade. These men sit in darkened cockpits, faces lit only by the green glow of their scopes, calling directions in calm voices while their pilots fly blind. Left, left, steady, range decreasing, 1 mile, half mile. The trust required is absolute. Pilots cannot see their radar operators, cannot verify the information, must simply follow instructions that might lead to collision, ground impact, or, if the operator is skilled and the equipment cooperates, to killing range behind an unsuspecting bomber. The system's limitations are significant. Radar operates best against targets at similar altitudes. Looking down into ground clutter reduces range dramatically. Weather affects performance. Heavy rain or snow creates false returns. The equipment is fragile, prone to failure from vibration, temperature changes, or simple electrical faults. Maintenance crews work through nights keeping the temperamental systems operational, replacing vacuum tubes, cleaning connections, calibrating transmitters. Pilots report that perhaps 1 in 3 patrols involves radar failure at some critical moment, forcing them to revert to pure visual searching. Yet when the system works, the results are devastating. A Beaufighter, equipped with functioning radar, becomes the most lethal aircraft in the night sky. It can find bombers in conditions where visual detection is impossible. It can track targets through evasive maneuvers. It can close to optimal firing range, 200 to 300 yards, where cannon accuracy is highest. The Luftwaffe faces an invisible threat, striking from darkness with no warning, destroying bombers that believed themselves safely hidden by night. Angle 5. Luftwaffe response. The first confirmed reports of radar-equipped British night fighters reached Luftwaffe headquarters in November 1940, drawn from interrogations and crash site investigations. The response is skepticism mixed with concern. Some officers dismiss the reports as British propaganda designed to intimidate bomber crews. Others recognize the threat but underestimate its scale, believing only a handful of experimental aircraft could possibly carry such equipment. The truth that Britain is rapidly expanding its Beaufighter force and that radar-equipped night fighters are becoming standard rather than experimental takes months to fully register. Bomber crews, however, understand the danger immediately. Stories circulate through Luftwaffe bases in France and Belgium. Aircraft that appear from nowhere, attacks from below where ventral gunners cannot effectively return fire, bombers exploding before anyone realizes a fighter is present. The psychological impact is profound. Crews who previously felt safe in darkness now scan empty sky nervously, starting at every engine sound that might be something other than their formation mates. Some crews request transfers to daylight bomber units despite the higher loss rates, preferring known dangers over invisible hunters. Luftwaffe tactics begin adapting by late 1940. Bomber formations fly at higher altitudes where thin air might degrade radar performance. They vary routes and timing, attempting to avoid establishing predictable patterns. Some aircraft begin carrying primitive radar warning receivers, simple devices that detect radar emissions and alert crews to possible fighter presence. Gunners receive orders to maintain constant vigilance even over England, where fighter activity should be minimal according to doctrine. None of these measures prove particularly effective. The Beaufighter's performance envelope allows it to operate at altitudes matching bomber cruising heights. Random routing helps somewhat, but cannot eliminate the vulnerability of bombers funneling toward major city targets. Radar warning receivers give seconds of notice at best, insufficient time for effective evasion. German crews increasingly report feeling hunted, a psychological reversal of the predator-prey dynamic that characterized early Blitz operations. The Luftwaffe's own night fighter force, equipped with radar, equipped Bf-110s and later Ju-88s, focuses primarily on defending German airspace against RAF bomber command attacks. These aircraft employ similar tactics to their British counterpart: ground control interception guided by radar chains, airborne radar for final approach, heavy cannon armament. By 1941, German night fighter pilots become devastatingly effective, inflicting terrible losses on RAF bomber streams. But over Britain, Luftwaffe bombers have no such protection. Their fighter escorts cannot operate effectively at night, and attempting to provide night fighter cover for bombers operating deep over enemy territory proves logistically impossible. The strategic implications crystallize slowly but inexorably. Britain's night defense, initially non-existent, is becoming lethal. The cost-benefit calculation of the Blitz shifts unfavorably. Bomber losses increase while damage inflicted fails to achieve strategic objectives. British morale does not collapse, industrial production continues, and Churchill's government shows no sign of negotiating. By spring 1941, the Luftwaffe begins withdrawing bomber units from France, redeploying them eastward for the planned invasion of the Soviet Union. The Blitz winds down not because it succeeds, but because it becomes unsustainable. Angle 6. Production race behind the Beaufighter's tactical success lies a frantic industrial effort. Bristol's Filton factory produces the aircraft alongside other types, operating under constant threat of Luftwaffe bombing. In November 1940, German raiders specifically target Filton, destroying several completed Beaufighters on the ground and damaging production facilities. Work continues regardless, with some assembly conducted in dispersed locations to reduce vulnerability to air attack. The Ministry of Aircraft Production assigns the Beaufighter highest priority status, allocating scarce materials and skilled labor to maximize output. Production numbers climb steadily. From initial deliveries of a few aircraft per month in autumn 1940, output increases to over 20 per month by early 1941. This requires solving numerous bottlenecks. Hercules engine production must expand, Hispano cannon manufacturing must increase, radar set production must accelerate. Each component comes from different suppliers, creating complex logistics chains vulnerable to disruption. The cannon shortage proves particularly acute. Hispano production facilities struggle to meet demand from Beaufighter, Spitfire, and Hurricane programs simultaneously. Bristol engineers continuously refine the design during production, incorporating lessons from operational experience. Early aircraft suffer from exhaust flame dampening issues. The bright blue exhaust glow from Hercules engines can betray the fighter's position to alert bomber gunners. Modified exhaust systems reduce flame visibility. Control surface balancing receives attention after several accidents involving elevator flutter. Cannon installation mounts are strengthened following reports of mounting bracket failures during high-G maneuvers. The human element of production proves equally critical. Factory workers, many of them women replacing men conscripted for military service, master complex assembly procedures. Riveting crews work with precision measured in thousandths of an inch. Electrical technicians install radar systems requiring meticulous attention to shielding and grounding. Test pilots fly every aircraft before acceptance, ringing out each machine in flight regimes that sometimes reveal manufacturing defects fatal to discover in combat. By spring 1941, over 100 Beaufighters serve in operational squadrons, with more arriving weekly. This growing force transforms Britain's night defence from hopeless to formidable, providing fighter command with a genuine capability to inflict unacceptable losses on Luftwaffe night raiders. November 19, 1940. The moon hangs full over southern England, casting cold silver light across clouds at 8,000 feet. Flight Lieutenant John Cunningham lifts his Beaufighter from RAF Middle Wallop at 15 hours, climbing into darkness with Sergeant Jimmy Rawnsley hunched over his radar scope behind him. Ground control reports a large raid forming over France, perhaps 50 bombers heading toward Birmingham's industrial heartland. The sector controller's voice crackles through Cunningham's headset. Hostile stream crossing Coast Dover, heading northwest, Angels 10 to 12. Cunningham steers northwest, climbing to 11,000 feet, settling into the practiced rhythm of the hunt. The Hercules engines drone steadily. Outside the canopy, nothing but darkness and occasional glimpses of cloud tops gleaming in moonlight. Rawnsley's voice comes through the intercom. Scope clear so far. Minutes pass. Cunningham adjusts course based on ground controller updates, flying a calculated intercept geometry that should place them ahead of the bomber stream. At 20:47, Rawnsley's voice sharpens. Contact, bearing dead ahead, range 3 miles, slightly above. Cunningham eases the throttles forward, gaining speed while maintaining altitude. The range closes, 2 miles, 1.5 miles, 1 mile. Slight left, Rawnsley calls, range 1,000 yards, 800, 600. Cunningham peers ahead into darkness, searching, nothing. Then, at 400 yards, he sees it. A dark cross shape silhouetted against moonlit cloud, twin engines, the distinctive greenhouse nose of a Heinkel He-111. The bomber flies straight and level, crew unaware of the predator closing from behind and below. Cunningham positions the Beaufighter 200 yards astern, slightly low, where the Heinkel's ventral gunner cannot depress his weapon far enough to engage. The bomber fills his reflector gun sight. He presses the firing button. 4 20mm cannons erupt simultaneously, their muzzle flashes briefly illuminating his cockpit in stroboscopic orange light. Shells stream into the Heinkel's fuselage and port engine. Explosions ripple along the bomber's spine. The port engine ignites, fuel spraying from ruptured tanks, fire streaming backward. Cunningham breaks right, diving away as the Heinkel rolls inverted and begins falling, trailing flame like a comet. Rawnsley watches it spin toward Earth, counting seconds until impact. Confirmed kill. He reports calmly they are not finished. Ground control vectors them toward another contact. The radar picks up a second bomber at 21.05, this one lower at 9,000 feet. The intercept geometry is perfect. Cunningham approaches from directly astern, using moonlight to silhouette the target, a Dornier Do-17. This crew is more alert. As Cunningham closes to 300 yards, the Dornier's rear gunner opens fire. Tracer rounds arcing past the Beaufighter's starboard wing. Cunningham ignores the fire, steadies his aim, and triggers another burst. The Dornier's glazed nose shatters, the starboard engine explodes, the bomber noses over, diving steeply, crew likely dead before the aircraft impacts in a Warwickshire field. 2 kills in one sortie. Cunningham lands at 22.35, debriefs quickly, and requests immediate refueling. His Beaufighter is airborne again by 23:20. The raid continues, bombers still streaming toward Birmingham, fires already visible on the horizon from earlier strikes. This time radar contact comes within 10 minutes. A Junkers Ju-88, faster than the Heinkel's, more maneuverable but equally blind to the fighter stalking from behind. Cunningham fires from closer range this time, 150 yards, and the effect is catastrophic. The Ju-88 disintegrates, pieces cartwheeling through moonlit sky. Cunningham flies through the debris field, fragments clattering off his wings and fuselage, his third kill of the night. He is not alone in this carnage. Across southern England, other Beaufighter crews are achieving similar successes. Flight Lieutenant Braham, operating from RAF Wittering, destroys 2 Heinkels within 20 minutes. Squadron leader Ashfield, vectored into the bomber stream over Coventry, shoots down a Dornier and damages a second so severely it crashes attempting to reach France. Flight Lieutenant Stevens claims a Heinkel confirmed and a probable over the Midlands. The night that should have been safe for Luftwaffe crews becomes a slaughter. Bomber formations, disrupted by fighter attacks, scatter their bomb loads wildly, missing industrial targets, hitting residential areas with reduced effect. By dawn on November 20th, Fighter Command tallies the results. Beaufighter squadrons claim 12 confirmed kills, 8 probables, and numerous damaged aircraft that likely crash, landed in France or ditched in the Channel. Ground observers and anti-aircraft batteries confirm several of the claims. Burning wrecks scattered across the countryside, German aircrew bodies recovered from crash sites. The loss rate is unsustainable. 50 bombers penetrated British airspace. 12 confirmed destroyed by fighters alone represents a 24% loss rate from fighter action, not including flak casualties or aircraft damaged beyond repair. Luftwaffe intelligence officers, analyzing missing aircraft reports, begin recognizing a pattern. The losses concentrate in areas where British fighter activity is highest. Crews that return report aggressive fighter attacks, accurate fire, approaches from unexpected angles. Some describe tracers from heavy cannon rather than machine guns. A few survivors mention seeing a twin-engine aircraft, bulky but fast, appearing suddenly before their bomber erupted in flames. The reports accumulate, painting a picture German commanders find deeply troubling. The night of November 19-20 is not an isolated success. It represents the inflection point where Beaufighter effectiveness reaches critical mass. Enough aircraft are operational, enough crews are trained, enough radar sets function reliably, and ground control coordination has matured sufficiently that systematic interception becomes possible rather than accidental. The Luftwaffe can no longer rely on darkness for protection. Every bomber crossing the English coast now risks encountering an invisible hunter, equipped with eyes that see through night and weapons that kill instantly. Goring, receiving loss reports at his headquarters, orders an immediate investigation. How are British fighters finding bombers in total darkness? What accounts for the sudden spike in losses? His intelligence staff provides fragmentary answers, reports of new British night fighters, possibly radar, equipped, significantly more effective than previous types. Goring demands countermeasures, but none exist. German radar technology lags British developments in critical areas. Bomber formations cannot fly faster to escape. They are already operating at maximum sustainable cruise speeds. Flying lower makes them more vulnerable to anti-aircraft fire. Flying higher reduces bombing accuracy and strains engines. The strategic reality becomes unavoidable. The Blitz, intended to break British morale and force surrender, is instead bleeding the Luftwaffe's bomber force at rates that cannot be sustained indefinitely. Replacement crews arrive at French bases inadequately trained, rushed through abbreviated courses to fill empty seats in surviving bombers. Veteran crews, having watched comrades burn night after night, report increasing stress, sleep deprivation, and declining morale. Some request medical evaluation for conditions that would ground them permanently, anything to escape the nightly terror of flying into darkness where death might arrive without warning. December 1940 through January 1941. The winter intensifies both weather and warfare. Beaufighter squadrons expand operations as more aircraft arrive from Bristol's factories. RAF Fighter Command establishes dedicated night fighter stations across southern and central England, each equipped with ground control interception radar and radio direction finding equipment. The system integrates into a network capable of tracking raids from the moment they cross the French coast until British fighters make contact. The efficiency improves with each operational night. Controllers learn optimal vectoring techniques. Pilots and radar operators refine their coordination. Ground crews reduce turnaround times between sorties, enabling some aircraft to fly multiple missions per night. On the night of January 16-17, 1941, the Luftwaffe launches one of its largest raids, over 100 bombers targeting London and industrial cities across England. The weather is marginal, scattered clouds at multiple altitudes, visibility variable, strong winds aloft. Conditions that should favor the bombers instead become their downfall. Beaufighter crews, now numbering nearly 30 operational aircraft across multiple squadrons, intercept the raid at multiple points. Flight Lieutenant Cunningham, flying his 30th operational sortie, claims his 10th and 11th kills. Both Heinkel he won. 111 was destroyed within 15 minutes over Essex. Flight Lieutenant Braham shoots down 3 bombers in a single patrol, his cannons so hot from sustained firing that ground crews find the barrels discolored when he lands. The destruction is methodical and relentless. Bomber crews report seeing aircraft explode ahead of them, behind them, above and below, often without seeing the fighters responsible. Some Luftwaffe pilots, catching glimpses of their attackers in moonlight, describe them in debriefings as large, dark, very fast, appearing from nowhere. The psychological toll accumulates. Crews flying through debris fields of destroyed aircraft, watching comrades' bombers fall burning, knowing that death might arrive in the next instant without warning, begin showing signs of combat fatigue earlier than crews operating in daylight, where threats are visible and countermeasured possible. January 17th brings another revelation. Luftwaffe bombers attempting to raid Welsh ports encounter Beaufighters equipped with the latest AIMK V radar, an improved system with better range and discrimination. Squadron leader Anderson vectored onto a formation of Dornier Do-17s at 13,000 feet, destroys 2 bombers and damages a third so severely it crashes attempting an emergency landing in France. His radar operator reports tracking the targets through clouds that would have made visual contact impossible. The capability to kill through weather, independent of moonlight or visibility, represents a fundamental shift in night combat dynamics. German bomber losses for January 1941 reach unprecedented levels. Of approximately 800 sorties flown against British targets, over 40 bombers failed to return, a 5% loss rate that exceeds sustainable operational parameters. Another 30 aircraft returned damaged beyond economical repair. Combat-effective bomber strength across units based in France and Belgium declines despite replacement aircraft arrivals. The veteran crews, those who survived Poland, Norway, France, and the early Blitz are dying or being captured faster than training schools, can produce competent replacements. Reichsmarschall Göring visits bomber bases in France during late January, attempting to restore morale. He promises new aircraft, better defensive armament, and assures crews that German night fighters will soon provide escort over England. The promises ring hollow. Crews know that German night fighters are desperately needed over Germany itself, defending against RAF Bomber Command's expanding offensive. No fighters will be spared for escort duty over England. The bombers must continue operating without protection, flying into increasingly lethal airspace, facing an enemy they cannot see until cannon shells tear through their aircraft. On February 10, 1941, a significant engagement unfolds over the Thames estuary. Formation of 20 Heinkel He-1 111s attacking London's docks encounters coordinated attacks from 4 Beaufighters vectored onto the raid simultaneously. The result is chaos. Bombers break formation, attempting to evade, scattering their bomb loads across empty marshland and river. 3 Heinkels fall within minutes. A 4th, hit but still flying, jettisons bombs and flees toward France trailing smoke. The remaining bombers abort their attack runs, turning for home with objectives unaccomplished. Ground observers report that not a single bomb hit the intended target area. All ordnance fell harmlessly in rural areas or water. This represents the ultimate failure of the Blitz strategy. Bombers reaching target areas but unable to execute attacks effectively due to fighter interference achieve nothing strategic. The resources expended, fuel, ordnance, aircrew hours, produce no commensurate damage. British industrial production continues. Civilian morale, though battered, does not collapse. The government remains resolute. Meanwhile, Luftwaffe bomber strength erodes, crew quality declines, and the impending invasion of the Soviet Union demands redeployment of assets eastward. March 1941 marks the operational culmination of the Beaufighters' dominance. Over 30 aircraft now operate across 6 dedicated night fighter squadrons. Pilots like Cunningham, Braham, and Stevens have become aces. Their names recognized throughout Fighter Command and increasingly known to the British public through carefully managed press releases. The Air Ministry, recognizing the propaganda value, authorizes limited publicity about the new night fighter, without revealing technical details. Newspapers publish stories about RAF Nighthawks are defending cities. Civilian morale improves with knowledge that the bombers are no longer unopposed. For the Luftwaffe, March represents strategic reassessment. Loss rates remain unacceptable. Intelligence has confirmed British night fighters possess onboard radar and heavy cannon armament. Some captured equipment, recovered from a Beaufighter that crashed in occupied France after combat damage, provides German engineers with physical evidence of British AI radar technology. The analysis is sobering. British radar development has outpaced German efforts in this specific application. Attempts to jam or deceive the systems prove ineffective. Countermeasures requiring fundamental redesign of bomber defensive systems would take months or years to implement. Hitler, planning Operation Barbarossa, the invasion of the Soviet Union scheduled for June, demands reallocation of bomber units to support the Eastern Offensive. the strategic calculus shifts. Continuing the Blitz serves no purpose if it cannot force British surrender, and clearly, surrender is not forthcoming. The bomber forces would be more effectively employed supporting Wehrmacht ground operations in the east. Göring, though reluctant to admit failure, cannot dispute the logic. Orders issue quietly through Luftwaffe command channels. Bomber units will redeploy eastward beginning in April. The Blitz will continue at reduced intensity through May, then cease. The decisive moment arrives not with dramatic announcement, but with bureaucratic inevitability. The Beaufighter, entering service just 6 months earlier as an unproven design operated by inexperienced crews, has achieved what Spitfires and Hurricanes could not. It has made the night sky over Britain too costly for Luftwaffe operations. The odd-looking fighter that German intelligence dismissed has fundamentally altered strategic calculations at the highest levels of German command. Darkness, once the bomber's shield, has become a hunting ground where British predators roam with impunity. The bombers will return to Germany and France, but they will not return as conquerors. They retreat as survivors, their confidence shattered, their losses unsustainable, their mission failed. And over English cities, as sirens fall silent and searchlights dim, the Beaufighters continue their patrols, heavy and ungainly and absolutely lethal, guarding skies they have reclaimed from those who claimed them as their own. May 1941. The last major Luftwaffe raid on London occurs on the night of May 10-11, involving over 500 bombers in a final, massive effort to inflict decisive damage on the British capital. The raid causes extensive destruction. The House of Commons chamber burns, Westminster Abbey suffers damage, over 1,400 civilians die, but the cost to the Luftwaffe is catastrophic. Beaufighter squadrons, reinforced with additional aircraft and coordinated through mature ground control systems, intercept the raid at multiple points. Over 30 bombers fail to return. Another 40 limp back to French bases with severe damage, many declared total losses upon landing. The exchange ratio has become completely unsustainable. After May 11th, the intensity of raids drops precipitously. Luftwaffe bomber units withdraw eastward throughout June, redeploying to Polish and Romanian airfields in preparation for Operation Barbarossa. The Blitz does not end with formal announcement or armistice. It simply fades as German strategic priorities shift. By late June, when Germany invades the Soviet Union, fewer than 50 bombers remain stationed in France and the Low Countries, conducting only sporadic nuisance raids against British coastal targets. The statistical record tells an unambiguous story. Between September 1940 and May 1941, RAF night fighters, primarily Beaufighters in the later months, destroy over 200 Luftwaffe bombers with confirmed kills. Probable and damaged claims push the total impact significantly higher. Anti-aircraft defenses account for additional losses, but fighter effectiveness increases dramatically over the campaign period. In September 1940, fighters achieve fewer than 10 confirmed night kills. By March 1941, monthly totals exceed 30 confirmed. The trend line is clear and irreversible. Luftwaffe bomber units suffer approximately 1,200 aircraft losses during the Blitz from all causes: fighters, flak, accidents, and weather. Crew casualties exceed 4,000 killed, missing, or captured. These numbers represent more than statistical abstractions. They represent institutional knowledge, tactical experience, and trained personnel that cannot be rapidly replaced. Many surviving bomber crews transfer to other theaters with combat fatigue, reduced effectiveness, and psychological trauma from months of nightly operations against increasingly lethal defenses. For Britain, the cost is also severe but strategically bearable. Over 40,000 civilians die in the Blitz. Hundreds of thousands lose homes. Major cities suffer extensive damage to residential areas, historic buildings and infrastructure. London's East End is devastated. Coventry's medieval centre lies in ruins. Liverpool's docks burn repeatedly. Yet British industrial production increases throughout the period. Factories disperse operations, night shifts expand, and workers demonstrate remarkable resilience. Churchill's government never seriously considers negotiation. The RAF ability to impose unacceptable costs on Luftwaffe night operations proves critical to maintaining this resolve. The Beaufighter force itself pays a price. Over 20 aircraft are lost to combat, accidents, and weather during the campaign period. Crew losses total approximately 30 killed or missing, a relatively low percentage compared to bomber forces, but representing skilled specialists whose training requires months. Some Beaufighters fall to return fire from bomber gunners, demonstrating that even with surprise and superior firepower, night combat remains dangerous. Flight Lieutenant Herrick dies when his aircraft, damaged by defensive fire, crashes during landing. Squadron Leader Rhodes disappears over the North Sea, cause unknown, possibly mechanical failure, possibly disorientation, possibly combat damage. The night is unforgiving even to hunters, yet the exchange ratio favours Britain overwhelmingly. For every Beaufighter lost, multiple bombers are destroyed. For every RAF night fighter crew killed, German bomber crews numbering 4 or 5 men die or become prisoners. The arithmetic of attrition decisively advantages the defender equipped with radar, directed night fighters over attackers operating in hostile airspace without fighter protection. The technological and tactical lessons learned during this period reshape air warfare doctrine permanently. The British night fighter system, integrating ground radar, radio control, airborne radar, and heavy fighter aircraft, becomes the template for future developments. RAF Bomber Command, watching the devastating effectiveness of the Beaufighter force, recognizes that their own bombers will face similar defenses over Germany. This recognition drives development of countermeasures, electronic jamming equipment, chaff to confuse radar, and tactical formations designed to overwhelm defenses through saturation. Germany, having experienced the consequences of inadequate night defenses, dramatically expands its own night fighter force. By late 1941, Luftwaffe night fighter units equipped with radar, equipped Bf-110s and Ju-88s, begin inflicting severe losses on RAF bomber streams. German night fighter pilots, men like Helmut Lent and Heinrich Prinz zu Sein, Wittgenstein, develop tactics mirroring British methods, guided by ground controllers onto bomber streams, then using airborne radar for final interception. The technological race between offensive and defensive capabilities accelerates, with each side developing innovations that the other must counter. The Beaufighter itself evolves beyond its initial night fighter role. As the war progresses, variants appear adapted for diverse missions. Coastal Command operates Beaufighters equipped with torpedoes and rockets, attacking German shipping in the North Sea and Atlantic. These aircraft, nicknamed Turbo by crews, sink thousands of tons of enemy vessels, wreaking havoc on convoys attempting to supply German forces in Norway. The heavy armament, 420mm cannons plus rockets, proves devastatingly effective against lightly armoured merchant ships and escorts. In the Mediterranean theatre, Beaufighters operating from Malta and North African bases dominate coastal waters, interdicting Axis supply lines to Rommel's Africa Corps. The aircraft's range and firepower allow it to patrol far from base, locate convoys, and destroy ships before fighter escorts can respond. German and Italian naval commanders learn to dread the appearance of Beaufighters, whose attacks often come with minimal warning, skimming low over water, launching torpedoes or rockets from close range, then escaping at high speed before defenders can organize effective response. Fighter Command continues operating Beaufighters in the night fighter role throughout the war, though eventually supplemented and partially replaced by the de Havilland Mosquito, a faster, more maneuverable twin-engine fighter that incorporates lessons learned from Beaufighter operations. The Mosquito, constructed primarily of wood and capable of over 400 mph, represents the next evolution in night fighter design. Yet Beaufighters remain operational through 1945, particularly in theaters where their ruggedness and heavy armament outweigh the Mosquito's speed advantages. Pilot careers launched during the Blitz period achieve legendary status. John Cunningham, who scored 3 kills on November 19, 1940, finishes the war with 20 confirmed night victories, becoming one of the RAF highest, scoring night fighter aces. His reputation extends beyond military circles. The British public knows him as Cat's Eyes Cunningham, a nickname deliberately cultivated by RAF intelligence to conceal radar technology from German knowledge. The propaganda story that Cunningham's exceptional night vision results from eating carrots becomes widespread, even influencing British dietary habits as parents encourage children to eat vegetables that supposedly enhance vision. Bob Braham achieves 9 confirmed kills, including multiple daylight victories, becoming the RAF most successful night fighter pilot. His aggressive tactics, pushing attacks to dangerously close ranges to ensure kills, earn both respect and concern from superiors. Braham survives being shot down twice, evading capture once and spending time as a prisoner after his second downing in 1944. His personal account of night fighting, published after the war, provides vivid detail of the psychological intensity of combat in darkness, the concentration required, the trust between pilot and radar operator, and the peculiar mixture of boredom and terror that characterizes hours of patrol, punctuated by seconds of violent action. The Luftwaffe bomber crews who survive the Blitz carry memories that shape their remaining war experience. Some, redeployed to the Eastern Front, find combat over Russia equally brutal but psychologically different. The enemy is visible, threats can be anticipated, and daylight tactics apply. Others express preference for any mission over returning to night operations against British defences. Interrogation reports from captured German airmen consistently reveal respect bordering on fear for RAF night fighters, particularly the Beaufighter with its heavy cannon armament. German aviation historians, analysing the Blitz in post-war assessments, identify the Beaufighter's deployment as a critical inflection point. Had Britain lacked effective night defences, the Luftwaffe might have sustained the bombing campaign indefinitely at acceptable cost, potentially forcing strategic concessions even if outright surrender remained unlikely. The Beaufighter's appearance and rapid operational success made continued bombing strategically futile, hastening redeployment of bomber forces to other theatres and effectively ending Germany's air offensive against Britain. The aircraft production figures reveal the industrial achievement underlying tactical success. Bristol produces over 900 Beaufighters between 1940 and 1945, with additional aircraft manufactured under license in Australia. This represents one of the largest production runs for any British twin-engine combat aircraft. The manufacturing effort requires coordination across hundreds of suppliers providing engines, armaments, instruments, and components. The fact that production continues uninterrupted despite German bombing of Bristol facilities demonstrates British industrial resilience. Technologically, the Beaufighter validates several design principles that influence post-war aviation. The concept of concentrated, heavy-forward firing armament becomes standard for fighter aircraft. The integration of radar into operational fighters, initially experimental and unreliable, matures into essential equipment. The two-seat configuration with dedicated radar operator establishes patterns followed by night and all weather fighters for decades. American aircraft designers, observing Beaufighter operations, incorporate similar concepts into aircraft like the Northrop P-61 Black Widow, which becomes the USAF's primary night fighter. The human cost, however measured, remains sobering. Every burn, Tout bomber represents 4 or 5 young men German airmen who believed in their mission, trusted their training, and died in darkness over foreign soil. Every destroyed Beaufighter means British or Commonwealth crew lost, families receiving telegrams, and the cold arithmetic of war adding to its ledger. The technical achievement and tactical success cannot erase the fundamental tragedy of lives consumed by conflict. Yet within that tragedy lies a truth about innovation under existential pressure. Britain, facing invasion and nightly bombing with inadequate defences, developed and fielded a revolutionary system combining radar, aircraft, and tactics in mere months. The Beaufighter, dismissed by enemies as an ungainly improvisation, proved that unconventional solutions often succeed precisely because they defy expectations. Speed and grace matter less than hitting hard and surviving. Elegance yields to effectiveness. The aircraft that looked wrong became the aircraft that won. The Beaufighter's story transcends the technical specifications, kill ratios, and tactical innovations that define its operational record. At its core, this is a narrative about human adaptation, the capacity to meet seemingly impossible challenges with imperfect solutions that prove sufficient when applied with courage and intelligence. The Luftwaffe claimed the skies were theirs not through arrogance, but through demonstrated capability. They had earned that confidence through victories across Europe, through superior tactics and technology deployed with devastating precision. Their certainty was rational, evidence-based, and ultimately incomplete. They failed to account for the desperation that drives innovation, for the creativity that emerges when survival itself depends on finding answers to problems that have no precedent. The odd-looking fighter that appeared in autumn 1940 was never meant to be beautiful. It was meant to kill bombers in conditions where nothing else could. Its designers understood that elegance and effectiveness need not coincide, that sometimes the best solution is the one that works rather than the one that looks right. The Beaufighter succeeded because it prioritized function over form, concentrated firepower over agility, and recognized that night combat required different tools than daylight engagements. But aircraft alone do not win battles. The men who flew the Beaufighter, pilots learning to trust radar operators they could not see, radar operators staring at flickering scopes while their pilots flew through darkness, ground controllers vectoring fighters toward invisible targets. These individuals mastered an entirely new form of warfare in months. They had no doctrine to follow, no historical examples to study, no certainty that their methods would work. They experimented, adapted, learned from failures, and persisted until the impossible became routine. The Luftwaffe crews who faced them deserve recognition too, not for their cause, but for their courage. Flying night after night into defended airspace, watching comrades burn, knowing that death might arrive without warning. This requires a particular kind of bravery, the willingness to continue despite fear and mounting evidence of futility. Their sacrifice, ultimately in service of a regime that deserved defeat, remains a human tragedy nested within the larger catastrophe of the war. History remembers the Beaufighter as the aircraft that broke the Blitz, and this is accurate as far as it goes. But perhaps the deeper lesson concerns adaptability itself, the recognition that certainty is fragile, that dominance is temporary, and that the side willing to embrace unconventional solutions often prevails over those bound by orthodox thinking. The Luftwaffe could not imagine an effective night fighter because their doctrine said such things were impossible. Britain built one anyway because they had no choice. In the cold mathematics of aerial warfare, the Beaufighter proved that an ugly, heavy, odd-looking machine flown by determined crews with new technology could defeat sleek bombers operated by experienced pilots who thought themselves safe. The lesson echoes beyond 1940, beyond aviation, beyond military history. Sometimes survival depends not on being the fastest, the strongest, or the most elegant, but on being willing to try something different when conventional wisdom offers only defeat. The night skies over Britain in 1941, once ruled by German bombers, fell silent not through surrender, but through a revolution in how battles could be fought. And in that silence lies a testament to human ingenuity under pressure imperfect, improvised, and ultimately triumphant.